Well, hi everyone, and welcome to Ask and Wonder, the show that brings Christians and skeptics together to talk about the big questions in life. And this is part two. Part two. I used to do beatbox in the past, so it shows sometimes. This is part two of a conversation I had with my two friends, Elliott Martin and Joel Diemoz. They're all secular thinkers, and so I'm very excited to have them here. And of course, the question was, is human life intrinsically valuable? The conversation was so fun that we just decided to give it another go because it's so interesting. And here we are. So Joel and Elliott, how are you guys?
I'm so well, man. Really excited to be here, furthering our knowledge on this topic.
Yes. What about you?
Yeah, I gotta agree with Joel there. Just excited to be here. Just always love these types of discussions and always excited when I get to participate in them. So.
Yes, I'm excited too. So yeah, before we start the conversation, just wanted to let you know that, as you know, you can connect with me by sending an email to askandwondernashville@gmail.com. And you can ask me questions. You can even challenge me. You can even, offer yourself as a speaker. And you can also sign up for the newsletter. You can go to the website and sign up for it. And just wanted to let you know that this episode is going to become also not only a YouTube video, but a podcast episode. And definitely, I've been saying this for a few weeks now, but I'm very excited to get back to Ask and Wonder live and bring people together. Let's hope that COVID-19 and all our efforts as a nation in the world, we can get together and get past this virus soon. And with that, let's start our conversation. So the question is human life intrinsically valuable? And in part one, we talked about the meaning of intrinsic. We talk about the meaning of valuable. We talk about differences. We talk about many interesting things about the context of the question itself. And today, for part two, I would like to start with actually answering the question. We can take it from there. So, Elliott, I would like to start with you. Um, is human life intrinsically valuable? How would you answer that question?
Yeah, I mean, as with all of these questions, right? It's always, it's difficult, right? But just to be, straight to the point, I think I would say no, and I think the reason I would say no is related to kind of right where we left off last time with what Joel was talking about, the subjective nature of value compared to the objective aspects of the concept of intrinsic. And I think a better way to phrase it, because I know anytime we say, oh, human life isn't intrinsically valuable, that just, a bunch of people go through loops thinking, well, then anything's allowed. But I think what we could say instead is human life valuable to humans? And then the answer unequivocally, I think time and time again, yes. But yeah, I think there might be a butting of heads between those two words back to back, intrinsic and value. And I think that's, again, kind of where Joel was leading us last time. So definitely, I want to know how he answers that question.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good answer. Good distinction there. Thank you, Elliott. Joan, why don't you give it a go? Is
Mm-hmm.
human life intrinsically valuable?
So first, I want to say, go Bills! First time Buffalo has been in the playoffs since 1995, or no, excuse me, the first time they've won a playoff game since 1995. We're on the path to the Super Bowl. We're gonna win it for Buffalo. Now, in terms of the question, I'm going to give a similar answer as Elliott, and I wish I had a little bit more clash or a little bit more disagreement, but maybe this is a product of us kind of collaborating on this question. My plain language answer is human lack intrinsic value because intrinsic and value, I'm not sure can go together. Elliott actually summed it up very nicely, and I don't think I need to add to any more than what he said in terms of why I'm not sure that those two words can really get along. However, I think that all humans do have value insofar as all humans can contribute potentially towards our collective survival. So all humans have at least the potential to contribute to our survival. Therefore, all humans have value, or at least potential value. Obviously, there's a lot of definitions that we're going to have to get into. There's a lot. I tried to find places where we couldn't like dig as deep as we wanted to last time, and I've got a couple of those written down. Maybe we can explore back into those themes. But yeah, that's my my plain language answer.
That's good.
And what do you think, Pedro?
Yes, thank you. This is a question that I've been navigating both as a Christian and then as an atheist. And definitely, I don't want to get that difficult with the answer or exploring the epistemological basis of my answer from when I was an atheist and now as a Christian. So I'll just summarize this in that the fact that God actually tells us that we are intrinsically valuable because we are made in his image. That is my answer for this question. So and definitely you guys can follow up with this that I just said, definitely, please. And I have a few questions also for you. Would you like to start asking me questions about that, or I can ask you questions?
Yeah. I don't know, maybe I'm jumping a little bit further on in the conversation, but a distinction that I think is important when it comes to this question about whether or not human beings actually do have intrinsic value or just value to humans or whatever, because that always seems very much tied to the next conversation, which is great, morality. Let's talk about what is and is not moral based on the intrinsic value of human beings. Mm-hmm. And I think the question comes up for me a lot of times, which is, okay, whether or not humans have intrinsic value, can we still have a foundation for morality? Can we still be moral actors in this system, in this society, right? And again, I don't know, maybe that's jumping a little bit too far down, because I feel like those are two questions, right? Like, do we have intrinsic value versus do we even need intrinsic value for the goals that we're going for?
Yeah, with that question, I can foresee a part 3 in which
we're not even 10 minutes in, we're calling 3.
In which we would talk about morality. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that is a pretty big topical jump, and I think that so it's what you're talking about is what I would call meta ethics, and I think that there are lots of interesting conversations to be had there. But I do think that we can make progress on this particular topic without necessarily delving into that realm. Now, for Pedro, I guess my question is: does God have intrinsic value?
Of course, I mean the way it is understood in Christian doctrine, as a Christian, of course, is actually the value itself and the fact that we can rationalize those concepts emerge from him. So definitely, yes, intrinsic value is something that emerges from the perfection of God, and that's why we can recognize it as human and finite beings. So not only he has it, but he represents the ultimate value per se, as it were. So that's the way I would answer that. Yeah.
And you said that because humans are made in the image of God, and so if I'm understanding what you're saying is, it's the fact that God exemplifies everything that we would consider to be value and worth and all that, and humans reflect that in some manner.
Definitely. Yes.
Okay. I think I
definitely
understand that.
And also the fact that we, for example, in terms of value, even though this is a thing I wanted to follow up with you guys and ask you a question, when we talk about subjectivity and stuff like this, even though that you guys accept in your worldview a type of subjectivity about value, At the same time, I would venture to say that there are things that are better than other things in the way you look at life. And that is a reflection of what I mean by the existence of an ultimate value. Like, we know that there are things that are better than others. And the way that I would say from my worldview that we know this is because there's an ultimate value on which we can reflect this. And the question that I wanted to, and you guys can ask me about this and challenge me, but I wanted to ask you a question, not in the sense of, oh, I found this question and now want to challenge you, whatever. I really want to understand this. I think in both your presentations, you guys said, well, okay, so human life is not intrinsically valuable, but then, of course, human life is valuable. And then in order to make that judgment, you used a certain kind of subjectivity. So my question for you is, this second nature value that you find in human beings within the context of subjectivity, how do you know that that value is value after all? How can you distinguish that?
So I'm not trying to make an appeal to an objective standard.
Okay.
And I'm trying to say, if you value human survival, all humans are able to contribute to that end. You can reject that, right? You're free to reject that notion, and some people do. And actually, that kind of brought me back to a question that I wanted to ask you. So I hope you don't mind if I gave a little answers. Do you want me to keep going on that, or?
Of course, whatever you want. Actually, just one comment. I actually would agree from the human survival aspects of it. It's part of my answer. We can actually explore if you want. Go ahead, sure.
Well, so my what I was trying to get at was this. I don't think there is actually an objective standard for value. And I think that even I could argue that without having to touch your God belief, right? I think that's compatible with the Christian position. Just value, by its definition, is a sort of a subjective thing. And I'm going to give you an example of this. Jeffrey Dahmer values human corpses, right? Because he likes to nibble on them because he's a serial killer, right? I don't think that is an emergent property of God, right? Craving, the dead flesh of another human to consume, right?
Yeah, well, that definition, Joel, I would say that you're focusing on one aspect of God, which is, well, in this conversation, which would be value, but also there is one of these infinite attributes that we learn from the way he has interacted with the world throughout history, which is goodness. So, and actually, both Christians and non-Christians, I would say the majority of us would recognize that what this person that you just mentioned does is not good. So that would be my answer for that.
If I could jump in right there. Or no, Joel, I mean, did you have something? You look like you had a thought.
Yeah, real quick.
Go ahead.
Then I'll surrender you to the floor, just because I'm afraid I'll forget this point if I don't make it right away. Because I think we talked about this last time, and I think that goodness and value are not the same thing, right? I don't even want to touch your argument about goodness or about morality, right? I can accept that maybe there is some objective absolute standard of goodness, but value, I think, and I hate to just appeal to definitions, means that we can reject that goodness and we can value something else. Jeffrey Dahmer valuing bodies to nibble on is not good, but it's still value.
And I think that kind of works real well into kind of where I was going, because I mean, there is always, and it kind of always feels like it's a hand wave when this is thrown out there, but it is actually a valid argument when it's like, well, yeah, but why should I care about goodness, right? Like, why are we obligated to give a crap more about saving the child versus, letting the child drown, right? Where is that in it as well? And that is important, because even if there is a hierarchy of what is good,
yeah,
and we could we could say that God is the ultimate, or anything is the ultimate definition of goodness. And we could then objectively say this is closer to that or further away from that, but there's still nothing in all of that that says, great, we should want the things that are closer to goodness. And just to go back real quick to answer that, where you said, where does that second set of value come from for, humans having value? Because I think we all agree on that, and it's just kind of a matter of how the heck do we get to our view of thinking that humans are, valuable in some way.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the best things that we have is exactly what Joel was talking about, kind of the analogy of, playing chess, right? If two people are playing chess, the two people want to win at chess, and they want to make the best moves to win at chess. And we can lay that out on a graph and say these moves, consistently work out better to winning the game than the other. But yeah, currently, we'd still have to fall back on the idea that we still don't necessarily have that obligation to care about playing chess and winning the game. I think there may be an answer that could potentially be derived from some concept of evolution. I mean, what is it? Jordan Peterson's talked about this a bunch. The lobsters have like something ingrained into their nervous system, that makes them like care about certain things rather than others. There could be some answer along those lines, but it's not fleshed out. We don't have a demonstration of it as far as I've seen. And yeah, the best answer we have right now is one that just basically says, if we want to play chess and we want to win, this is how you do it. But we still don't have that, should we play chess, yes or no,
I like that. I like where the conversation is going. Okay, so here's my thoughts about all of this. In a world in which you guys accept this already, in a world in which actually religion or the God wouldn't exist at all. That's not my position. And only a mechanism like the evolutionary mechanism of survival would actually explain our psychology and the decisions that we make. Even in a world like that, I don't think, which could actually be reflected to the one in which we are. Many people don't believe in God, and many people don't end up doing what this serial killer is doing. So even in a world like that, people wouldn't end up doing what that serial killer is doing. So even from a secular perspective, atheist perspective, or in a world in which the mechanism of evolution is explaining the way we understand value, the question ends up diluting to the point of accepting some type of metaphysics to the existence of any kind of value. So again, I would say that in a world in which God doesn't exist, and many people in the world think like that, I don't see people that don't believe in God becoming serial killers and doing all of this. So again, there's something in us that lead us to do, I would say, good things or better things than those things that you mentioned. So, and I think that argument is inescapable. What do you guys think about that?
So I mean, I agree that moral motivations exist, right? I think that there's a reason that we try, or there's reasons why we choose to do good over bad. But I think that's separate from the question of value. And maybe I can use value in a different way to illuminate this point. We talked about value as an economic concept last time. So a company could do something valuable. They could do something valuable for their bottom line, but not necessarily good. So for example, they have to streamline their workforce. So they got to lay off a bunch of people. They got to lay off senior employees. And it's heartbreaking because it's a company, it's a family. Nobody wants to do that. But it's valuable because it preserves their bottom line, but it's not necessarily a good thing, right?
So yeah, that I like that because at the end of your explanation, Joel, you again used the word good. So I'm starting to think, could the concepts of value and goodness be separated after all?
Yeah,
It seems we're going back to this a lot.
yeah, and yeah, definitely. Kind of echoing those 2 points. When we as individual actors make the decision and say a glass of water in the desert is more valuable to us in this moment than a chunk of gold, right?
Hmm.
That just is always subjective, and that goodness in there that we're talking about is just purely situational, purely where we happen to be a lot of the times, and that's why values can change so much. And I pulled up just a random definition of value, and it says the regard that something is held to deserve the importance, worth, or usefulness of something. And
Amen.
I feel like that's a pretty that's a pretty good definition. And what comes into that is, yes, once we as the things that can make the value judgment, once we sit down and look at something, we get to go, oh, we like this better than this, we prefer this more than this. But that goodness that we're ascribing to any particular choice that we're making is not, it is separate from what goodness is. If there is this objective value of goodness, they're two different things. While again, they may be entailed, they may be a Venn diagram that sort of overlaps a little bit, right? But there are these massive aspects of both that don't come into play with each other. And again, that may be perfectly fine. There may be absolutely nothing wrong with that, because, for instance, just the three of us, let's say we all agree that it's wrong to eat dead people, murder people and eat them, right? Just because I like that we're using that. But we may all agree that that's the case, and we all still may get to that conclusion,
Yeah.
and that's that in and of itself, because we care about that has value, that we get to the same conclusion.
Let me say something about this. I would like to hear your thoughts about this. I love this conversation. The examples that you guys are using, for example, economics, or this example that I usually use, by the way, is a very good one: a glass of water or an ounce of gold, and all of these. We're talking about things around us, things that we can experience, things that are outside of us. But my problem with all of this is that human life is actually the filter through which we understand reality. So this is kind of the nucleus. This is us. In terms of value, when I value a glass of water, definitely yes. Gold in different context, and economics, yeah, there's value. But in terms of actually the entity that is able to make this type of judgments, that is when I go, wow, this should we place human life at the same level that economics, or because economics and these value judgments couldn't exist without human life. Well, actually, I wouldn't say that. I don't know that, but I don't see how. As a human life, as a human being, I don't know how those could exist without the existence of a brain or human life, and uh, uh, some type of judgment and value that comes from our lives. And my other point is this: something that you mentioned, Elliott, that I like it, at the beginning in your introduction. Look, even if God doesn't exist, if we just look at the world, there's nothing as valuable as and as special as human life. I would say the things that we are discovering in the universe are beautiful, definitely, and fantastic. But I don't think we have found up until now something as special, as unique, as, I don't want to say it, but potentially valuable. I just said it, than human life. So even from the argument in nature, there's something special about humans. So what do you think about all of this?
So as a good Kantian, and this is delving into the realm of metaethics, I think that all humans should be treated as ends themselves. So I agree with you. Each and every individual human is a special, wonderful, complex thing that I think, as I see it, arises from this beautiful natural process. And I think that each one of those conscious entities has, for example, an equal right, an equal claim to life and to liberty and to the pursuit of their own ends in this world, right? So I don't necessarily think that I disagree with you there, right? And again, going back to my my opener, I think that we can all be valuable in our collective struggle for survival. But again, I'm not quite sold on the sort of the intrinsic property of it all.
So, Joel, how do you know, for example, that humans, what is your basis to claim, for example, that humans should be treated as ends in themselves?
Oh my gosh. All right. I'm gonna have to like pull up one of my reference papers.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I'm sure you can do it in a few minutes.
I can try. Okay. So Christine Korsgaard wrote a really good book about this that explains it much better than I could. It's called Creating the Kingdom of Ends. And basically, Elliott, you talk for a minute.
I can vamp. Trust me. I've been writing furiously. Because there's a couple of different things that we touched on that I think are just absolutely awesome points. And honestly, the first one I wanna touch on, because I actually wrote it in all caps with exclamation points, because I agree. Humans rock. Humans are awesome. There is something incredible about the existence and life that is composed in a human. And just like Joel keeps coming back to and reminding us about the potential for any individual human to add such value to the collective humanity and our history and our society as it is now and in the future. I mean, that is such an important point, I think. And sometimes it gets lost in these big, conversations and far out debates like this, where, we forget that the atheist and the Muslim or the secular thinker and the follower of Christ, we forget that they all agree that all humans are important, at least to us. Even if we don't have that basis agreed upon, even if we don't have every little step laid out perfectly, we still have this agreement wholeheartedly that it's like, hey, shake my hand, good to see you, man, hope you're doing well. This psychopath murderer that killed all those people, that's a shame that he did that, he shouldn't have done that. And that is important, I think. But there are a couple of other quick things I'll touch on. Pedro, you were kind of going down this route where it seems like you were kind of questioning whether or not certain values would exist without humans. And I think, honestly, I mean, yeah, some of them just aren't going to exist. If human beings aren't around to talk about the latest and greatest technology or fashion, yeah, I mean, they just better technology or better clothing won't matter because there's nobody here to judge it. But this I thought was wonderful, and I think this might help clarify some stuff too. You talked about how that value is still always being filtered through us as humans, as the individuals, right? And I think that is really important, and I think this might help. I don't play chess, and it's not like I've tried and I just wasn't particularly that interested or that good, and I didn't get much better. But in years past, I've played with people that had all different types of strategies. And when I first started playing chess, I just remember a lot of people telling me how important the queen was. if you're gonna lose a player, if you're gonna lose a piece on the board, it better not be that queen. That queen is so valuable. And then I met a guy who sacrificed his queen almost the very second, third move. I mean, as soon as he could, he would sacrifice his queen. And I asked him, and I watched him beat person after person. I asked him, I was like, why do you do that? The queen is so important. And he's like, not the way I play. I don't value the queen at all. I value the bishop, man. Yeah. The rook can just kill it. I'll put everybody into checkmate with my bishop, you know? And so, yeah, we're still gonna have a little bit of a difference when it's being filtered through us, you know? And I think that might be a decent example for like, hey, this kind of shows that, yeah, the value isn't outside of us, you know, as a collective, as an individual. Now, again, whether or not that comes from something completely outside of the universe and outside of our conception as humans, or whether that just comes from the fact that, you know, billions of years ago, it was a hot planet with some bacteria that eventually turned into all this crazy stuff. You know, we haven't necessarily gotten that perfect yet. But we will, yeah, we'll still have different values, filtering it through ourselves.
That's very interesting. I have a few questions, but Joe, would you like to?
Yeah. If I may. So a real brief exposition on like Kant / Kierkegaard, and I guess a little bit where I'm arguing from. And this is somewhat dense philosophy, and if I was a better philosopher, I'd be able to explain it to people better, but I'll give it my best shot. Humans act upon imperatives. They act upon maxims, an imperative or a maxim or rule that they create for themselves. There is a universalization of a rule that applies for everyone. It's what Kant calls the categorical imperative. And basically that states that we need to treat all humans as ends in themselves. This is such a poor defense. I actually, you know, I feel like if Dr. Michael saw this, he'd be disappointed with me, but that's all right. Basically, the idea is, what right do I have to impose my view, to treat somebody else as an end when they are themselves their own conscious entity that are capable of pursuing their own ends? Now, there's a lot more to say about that subject in terms of like moral conflict and distributive justice and all that, but that's sort of the foundational principle that I'm working from, is that I'm an end, you're an end, Elliott's an end, Pedro's an end. We're all ends together. We're all sort of sharing this collective space, and not one of us has a particularly good reason or any reason at all to be able to impose their view, to treat somebody else as an end.
And that is powerful, I think. I mean, I remember hearing about that, you know, for the first time, you know, in my life years ago, and just thinking like, holy crap. Like, if you accept that alone, that's powerful. There's a lot of actions that you can't take. You can't do a lot of things when it comes to interacting with other humans, because you're not treating them like an ends, you're treating them like a means to your ends. And I mean, it's strong. It's the same thing when I listen to Cosmic Skeptic. When I listen to him really lay out the bare bones about why we should all be vegan, it's a really good argument. It's a really, really powerful statement, you know? I'm not there yet completely. I'm still immoral, but that's okay.
It's worth noting that the reasons that we should accept this categorical imperative, I haven't actually touched on. And they lay out explicitly like why this should matter and why this actually does matter. Has to do with identity, our identities as humans.
Yeah, that I have a few thoughts, and a few thoughts I actually don't know where to take them, because some of them are kind of in contrast with each other. But the first thing I would say about all of this is, it reminds me a little bit of the limitations of skepticism. So where are the limits of skepticism? When I hear you guys saying, for example, human beings that are ends in themselves. It could be because of Kant made that argument or assumption, or because these are the different arguments about that. There is a I think it's a fair question, which is but wait a second, we always or very often we ask the question, like, how do we know that? Like, we want to know that. And it seems to me that sometimes um certain areas of skepticism, they're not skeptics to to the I don't know, like there's a skepticism with limitations. Like, we know that humans are ends in themselves, and we're going to stay with that because that is what actually works at this moment. Or perhaps it's because what we see, or perhaps this is going to change in the future. But I'm telling you, I'll be super honest with you. I want to show my weaknesses to you. I'm not having these conversations to, hey, God exists, accept it. I want to explore my worldview with you. When I was an atheist, that answer wasn't enough for me. It just wasn't. If you're saying that a human life is an end in itself, and then we are contextualizing all of this in the sense that we're conscious being with the capacity of being subjective, and actually subjectivism is parts of this respectable nature of what a human is. We can have our opinions about everything. Then the question for me remains. One of the things that you said, Joel, that I actually like, which is I cannot, or and you correct me because I don't want to put words in your mouth that you didn't say. I don't want, how can I impose this to you? Because you perhaps had different values or definitions of value or goodness. That is exactly what God does. Like, all this problem completely disappear when you have someone that sets a definition of value that is beyond every single one of us, and actually sets a definition of value that goes against any type of pride, jealousy, sin, in the way we call it in my worldview, that would actually dissipate these type of values that we make of each other. You guys are all valuable, period. And you need to fight for any human life that you see around. I think that is very powerful. I think one of the things that I would say, Elliott, and I'll finish with this, was mentioning something about being the filter. Being the filter. We human beings are the filter. I mentioned that, you mentioned that as well. I was yielding that, putting myself in the shoes of an atheist. Let's put it that way. But of course, I don't see it that way. But I usually do this because I want to always know if my worldview is right or not. So those are the kind of the points that I wanted to share with you, and you guys can follow up with questions, challenge me, or whatever you guys want to do.
Yeah, so Pedro, I think that if this value that you're describing, if it existed, I think it would be a useful thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
If there was an absolute objective standard of that which is valuable that we could all point to and be like, no, dude, you're wrong. That's what's valuable. Of course, that'd be useful. And perhaps society would function better that way. Let's say that we all just pretended arbitrarily that the Baptists were correct, right? And their version of value was the objective version of value, and everything else be damned. It would certainly make the trains run on time, right? But I don't see that value existing, right? And if God existed, and this particular God, this interceding God that you're talking about, this Christian God, this God that cares about us, if he existed, yeah, I mean, that'd be fine. Right. And like I said, it'd be good for, societal cohesion, but I don't think it exists for other reasons.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that is the point that I'm thinking. Of course, it's just that's the beginning of where the worldview starts. So that's a good point. Yeah.
And I think Joel really just hit a great point, and not as explicitly as I was thinking about hitting it, which is, you said that, if let's say yes, we definitely have God as the creator of everything, as the Kalam lays it out, that conception of it, whatever, right? And everything comes from that, and therefore we can show, the intrinsic objective value of humanity based on that. You said the problems disappear, but I don't think they do, and I think
one thing, Elliot, if you
please.
Sorry. So yeah, that is a good point. It's I wasn't saying that the problem would disappear because we see that
we have an answer to them. We have an answer to these problems,
and the problems haven't disappeared. If actually we live in a world in which God exists,
right?
The problems, but there's also parts of the Christian worldview actually tackles this question about human nature, something that is going wrong with this, but just wanted to say that. Yeah,
right. No, and no, I greatly appreciate that, and not going down the route of the human nature and fallen and trying to get back to God and everything, but just simply, I mean, would you say it's fair that the answer to these problems and questions is solved if God, if God is everything that you conceptualize it as, God has created the world, put value into us because we're made in his image. The answers that we've been, fighting back and forth about, they're solved, right? Is that the way you see it?
I mean, that is the way I approach this conversation.
Okay.
Now, the fact that then there is definitely the side of it, me as a finite being with a finite years in life, with a person that is not perfect and all of this, that my understanding of infinite as a finite being
may not be perfect.
That is actually the biblical worldview as well. I cannot get a grasp. I can have those visions there, of course. Visions not in the sense that I see things. That's not the word I meant.
I think I get what you're going.
Yeah, having the concepts there.
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, and I think that that's still okay, which is where with where I was trying to go and where Joel touched on, which is one thing that Joel said that I really started nodding my head to was when he said, yeah, if there was this objective standard where we could just all point to it. And I think that's it. The demonstration, the repeated reliability, the testing of this particular objective set of values that sits outside of us, that's when we would all go, oh yeah, crap, there it is, But without that demonstration, it's very difficult to accept that, I think, for a lot of us. And same thing. Like if we could just undeniably, without any question whatsoever, say, hey, look, here it is. This is everything we need to show that God exists. Jesus was his son, rose from the dead, everything. Then we would still have, the choice to say, oh, well, I don't want to worship it, or I don't really care about that, or whatever. But we couldn't argue that it exists and that it's there. And I think that's one of the biggest problems. And it's not necessarily like I've been saying. I mean, it's not really currently solved by the non-theistic side. We still have to all agree that we're playing chess to win. If one guy's not playing to win, well, then the game's a little bit weirder. Like, it doesn't seem to work as well, The other guy's just playing to make literally as many moves on the board and not care whether he's doing better or doing worse. Then it changes everything about it. So it still seems to be like there's no answer either way just yet on either of those without that definitive demonstration. And that's frustrating. I mean, I get that.
That is very, very cool, man, that you're mentioning all of this, because in fact, in the Christian worldview, the definite demonstration was Jesus. So that is actually that is in fact the pinnacle demonstrating these values, at least for the way we see it, if God wouldn't have become a human being, we wouldn't have seen it. We wouldn't have had this example that we could follow. An example that helps us distinguish, for example, or discern when we see Donald Trump with a Bible standing in front of a camera, both Christians and non-Christians would say, okay, there's something that is not working there. So that is interesting that you mentioned that, because actually I think we have it in Jesus, but definitely a conversation for another time. Joel, thoughts?
Yeah, Pedro, I had a question. Do you think that Terry Schiavo in her comatose state had inherent value?
So first question, I'm sorry for my ignorance. I don't know who Terry
is. It's okay. Yeah, I probably should have volunteered this information to begin with. So Terry Schiavo was a pretty famous case back in the early aughts of a woman that I believe she had a heart attack. Her brain went without oxygen for a significant period of time. She was put on life support. There was no neurologic activity. And in fact, the brain became sort of disordered, right? The actual neural connections of the brain broke down. She was essentially with really no functioning brain, only being kept alive via machines.
Oh, and now the question is, what is the question?
Well, does she have intrinsic value?
Okay, so that's a fair question. I would say if we get into real, not conceptual approaches to this conversation, but real life example, maybe this is very daring to say, but I don't know. I'll say it in a funny way. I think the Christian always wins. It's so wins in the sense, I don't know. I'm trying to say it in a funny way, but like the Christian worldview is not actually a conceptual worldview that is out there that you can detach from and then you live your life in a different way. Actually, this worldview is something that you're supposed to enact physically, the way you talk, the way you move, the way you react, the way you see others. So my answer to this question is the following. I am not God. I wasn't part of this situation, but as a Christian in my 7 years exploring this worldview and seeing the way Jesus treated everyone, Joel, anything that it can be done to sustain a life should be done. Now, beyond that, Joel, for example, I'll give you an example. Definitely, I talk sometimes with my wife, and I go, what happened? See, these are very difficult questions. Someone goes and rapes my wife, and she becomes pregnant, and now you go, I know those are very good. I think actually those are the questions that we should be asking, because at the conceptual level, everything is so cool. Oh yeah, value this and all of this is cool. But when those things happen is when you actually go, what do you do there? Well, the answer is always life is actually intrinsically valuable. That would be my answer. And different situations require different approaches, I would say, but there is a context through which you would take those decisions. That would be my answer.
Do you think we should ignore people's DNR, do not resuscitate requests then?
Would you repeat the question, please?
So there's what's called a do not resuscitate agreement. It's a medical agreement. It's a medical document that says if I'm incapacitated, if I flatline, I believe it has to do with the heart. If my heart stops, you can't restart it. You just have to let me die. Now, what I hear you saying is that all life is intrinsically valuable, and that any steps and every step to preserve life should be taken. I mean, to me, that almost seems like, from your worldview, is a DNR a suicide? Yeah.
No. So that is a good observation, Joel. One of the things that is beautiful and sacred in human life is the acts of free will. So I would, if a person decides that a person doesn't want to live anymore and signs papers, and a person has that will, I wouldn't interfere with that, because that is the decision of the holder of that life. So that is one of what a sacred thing of human life that I wouldn't interfere with. But the value is there, though. If a person decides not to live anymore, I cannot. No one is supposed to force a person to live. Perhaps to encourage to find value in life, but I don't think that any Christian or any person of any worldview should decide if a person should keep living or not, because that is secret. That is actually part of the Christian worldview as well. There's freedom of choice. Go ahead.
I have two things. Yeah. Because this one, I mean, both of them, I think are really interesting. The one is just clarifying real quick, because it sounded like one of the reasons that you would respect the DNR and not continue to try to bring the person back is because humans have the free will to make that choice. Is that right? Was I understanding that right? Like they chose, hey, don't do this, and so we respect that. That's their choice.
That is sacred. That is,
okay.
They are the owners of their own. Yeah, of course.
And you've said back and forth, and I want to make sure you've said that life itself has value. Does that go to animals and plants and stuff too, or is it just people that we're really talking about?
Okay, so good question too. Definitely,
yeah.
We're talking about humans, and now.
Okay, cool. Because my next question, honestly, was going to be, okay, well, do animals have free will? But we don't need to go down that route, because I think that puts us some interesting stuff.
This is part 4.
Yeah. But the last thing that you said, though, I think it puts us into another question, and just like you do this often, which I love, man. You always want to try to bring it back to the right here, the right now. How do we take this into tomorrow and act on it? And I think that's one of the most important things about beliefs, is that beliefs do they do cause us to act in various ways, in different ways. Mm-hmm. And so a question with what you were just saying there, you were saying something along the lines of if somebody makes that choice on their own, it shouldn't be on me to force them to try to, find the value and continue and so forth. Would you say you're for like physician-assisted death then? Like an individual that has been diagnosed with terminal cancer, they have, let's say, 8 months to live, and it's probably, from everything we understand about this particular type of disease or illness or whatever, it's going to be rough. Would you say that with what you were just saying right there, respecting the DNR, that answer, would you also say that person has the right to, end it early? I guess, just kind of as an easy way to say it. Does that make sense where I'm going with that? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so the first thought that comes to mind for me is that this type of legalism that was necessary, another conversation for another day, that we find in the Old Testament, was kind of overcome by Christ when he came. With this, what I mean is that these questions of yes, no, yes, there are some answers that I can give as a Christian, and I wouldn't have any problem to give you a yes or no answer according to my knowledge of it and my experience of it. These cases, Elliott, these cases are more delicate because
Sure.
we're talking about people.
Sure.
If I say, hey, yes, yeah, shut off the machine, he or she's that is the best thing I can do to answer this question is, look, if they ask me, if I'm there, they ask me, if there's if this short glimmer of hope that a life can be brought back, and this life could actually mean and do good things for other people and all of that, I'm going to support this because that's the value in it. But the sacredness of life is that we are individuals in the eyes of God. This is the worldview. We are individuals, and we have been given these incredible gifts of choosing who we are, what we want to do, what we want to do with our lives. So each case, the family, when a person, usually it could be a person dying alone, but then there's family around, and that it's not as easy as just to say yes, no. It's complicated, because we're not just, another conversation, part 5, we're not just only physical beings. That's the way, at least, I see it, and I saw it as an atheist as well.
If I could just real quick,
Go
because
ahead.
I know Joel has more knowledge on this than me,
Yeah.
but if I'm not mistaken, Kant, in his understandings, he struggled with the idea of somebody taking their own life as well. The whole autonomy can't kind of end autonomy, right?
Yeah.
Is that, am I wrong on that? Am I mistaken?
But I mean, Kant very well may have written about suicide.
I don't know if it was explicit. I think there was something related to, forgive me if I'm mistaken, but there was something related to a woman at the time that actually wrote Kant personal letters, and there was something related to potentially her discussing suicide, and Kant responding by saying something related to autonomy is so valuable in and of itself that it can't stop itself, even its own autonomy.
Wow.
But I could be thinking of something else on that.
I want to look up that there.
Yeah, I will definitely be looking it up. The interesting thing, I'll end with a little tidbit of information. The interesting thing about Kant is he actually never left his home.
Yeah.
He never what? He never what? Sorry.
He never in his entire life left his hometown. He stayed in his hometown within about 30 miles. At one point, he left to teach somewhere else, but it was pretty close. Never left that little area in Poland.
Wow.
Definitely gives a different worldview, right? I mean,
to me, it almost speaks to his philosophy. So he was all about a priori philosophy, so knowledge without experience, as opposed to like the British empiricists who presumably traveled the world and saw India and got their knowledge by, by way of experience.
Well, that's so interesting. So Kant had a worldview-ish, a little one, right?
Yeah, small one.
But even from that small town, and just from his introspection, just from him thinking about his mind, I mean, he came up with he's one of the most brilliant writers that we have in the Western canon.
I'm very thankful for you. I'm excited to actually say what I'm about to say, and I'm going to record it so viewers see it officially. I don't know if you guys would be open to this, but I think a conversation on 2 things that I would like to talk with you about. The first one is morality. I think we have mentioned this a few times. And actually, this simple question, but I think it would be interesting. And we could actually, instead of doing 1 hour, we could do 2, is the simple question, does God exist? And just talk about that. I think that would be interesting too. I would love to invite you, have you over in the show. I learned so much, and I would like to keep the conversation going. So are you guys up for more time with me?
So back in 1995, the head coach of the Buffalo Bills is a fellow named Marv Levy. He was real famous. He had this real famous saying. He'd get the whole team together and he'd say, "Boys, men, where else would you rather be than right here?" That's all I got to say to that. Yeah, let's go. I love it.
You know what I'm thinking? It would be very interesting also if I could invite another friend, perhaps.
Yeah.
It would be very interesting to have a conversation.
Yeah.
So let's do morality next time. And I'll be in touch with all of you about this. Okay?
Absolutely, man.
Well, thank you very much, Joel. And thank you very much, Elliott. As always, this is just, as you just said, we could be here till, I don't know. This is so fun. And thank you very much for viewing. And thank you very much for being there. As you always know, you're watching this on YouTube. Perhaps you're listening to this as a podcast version. If you would like to connect with Ask and Wonder, would like to connect actually with Joel, or you would like to connect with Elliott, just let me know. You can email me at askandwondernashville@gmail.com. And it would be my pleasure like people say at Chick-fil-A. It would be my pleasure to help you connect with these amazing thinkers and friends. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you guys for spending time with me,
Thank
and
you.
I'll see you next time.
Cheers.